story of America does not begin with Columbus, nor with powerful empires, nor with the drawing of maps. It begins much earlier, in a forgotten age when much of our blue planet was buried beneath endless sheets of ice, when survival itself was humanity's greatest achievement, and small bands of early humans walked carefully across a frozen and hostile earth, their bodies wrapped in animal skins, their hands gripping crude stone weapons, their eyes constantly searching the horizon for danger. Because thousands of years ago, the world entered one of the harshest eras in its history, a time when glaciers swallowed entire landscapes, when oceans pulled back as their waters were trapped inside mountains of ice, and when every breath of air felt sharp enough to cut the lungs of those who dared to live in that brutal cold. In this silent white wilderness, small groups of hunters moved like shadows across the snow, driven not by curiosity, but by hunger, following the tracks of animals across dangerous, frozen terrain, without knowing that one such desperate hunt would unknowingly change the destiny of half the planet forever. Because around 20 to 25,000 years ago, a group of hunters from Siberia followed migrating animals across a strange stretch of land that had appeared between continents, a temporary frozen corridor formed only because the oceans had retreated as ice locked away the planet's water, creating a natural bridge between Asia and a vast unknown continent that no human had ever imagined. Step by step, year after year, generation after generation, these wanderers crossed into this new land not as conquerors or explorers, but simply as survivors, searching for food, warmth, and safety. And as centuries slowly turned into thousands of years, their descendants spread across this enormous, untouched land of forests, rivers, deserts, and mountains, adapting to every environment they encountered until they became the first Americans, the original inhabitants of a continent that would one day become the most powerful nation on Earth, even though, at that time, they were simply people trying to live another day. Then, about 11,000 years ago, the great ice began to retreat. Temperature slowly rose, glaciers melted, and the seas began to rise again. And as waters returned, they swallowed the ancient land bridge beneath dark waves, cutting off contact between the Old World and the New World for thousands of years, leaving millions of people on both sides completely unaware that another human world even existed, as if two separate human stories were unfolding on the same planet without ever touching each other. While Europe, Asia, and Africa continued their own histories filled with wars, trade, and empires, the people of the Americas built their own civilizations in complete isolation, creating complex societies that would rival any in the Old World. Because long before European ships ever crossed the Atlantic, great cities were already rising in the Americas, temples were already touching the sky, and powerful civilizations were already shaping history in silence. In the lands that would one day be called Mexico, the mighty Aztec Empire ruled over hundreds of cities and millions of people, building grand temples and engineering wonders in the middle of lakes. While further south, the Maya civilization spent thousands of years mastering astronomy, mathematics, and art. And deep in South America, the Inca Empire stretched across mountains from Ecuador to Chile, connecting millions through roads carved into impossible cliffs, proving that human greatness does not depend on technology alone, but on discipline, intelligence, and vision.
And beyond these great empires, countless smaller tribes lived across forests, plains, and rivers from Canada to Brazil, farming maize, hunting animals, and living close to nature, never imagining that far beyond the endless ocean, another world existed, just as Europe never imagined that millions of people were already living across the sea, waiting unknowingly for a meeting that would change history forever.
That meeting would only become possible when Europe itself was pushed into desperation, when the fall of Constantinople in 1453 shattered old trade routes, broke economic stability, and forced European powers to search desperately for new paths to Asia, unknowingly setting the stage for one of the most important voyages in human history, a voyage that would soon bring two worlds face to face after 11,000 years of silence.
When Constantinople fell to the forces of Sultan Mehmed II in 1453, it was not just the fall of a city, but the collapse of a psychological fortress for Europe. Because this city had stood for centuries as the last proud memory of the Roman Empire, a sacred center of Orthodox Christianity, and a powerful trade bridge between Europe and Asia. And when its mighty walls finally gave way to Ottoman cannons, the shockwaves were felt across the entire European continent, where merchants suddenly found their trade routes threatened. Priests saw it as a spiritual defeat, and rulers feared that their influence over the world was beginning to fade.
The loss of this city created an economic disaster across Europe, because the ancient land routes that once carried silk, spices, precious stones, and luxury goods from China and India suddenly became dangerous or closed entirely. Merchants lost fortunes overnight. Port cities began to decline, unemployment spread, hunger increased, and desperation slowly began to replace confidence, as the dream of easy Asian wealth seemed to vanish behind political barriers and rising rival empires. As poverty spread through Europe, stories began to circulate of starvation, crime, and hopelessness, where some desperate families abandoned their children because they could not feed them, where struggling farmers fell into crushing debt, and where crime became so common, power and stability to their troubled societies.
At the same time, a spiritual fear was growing among European Christians who believed their religious influence was shrinking as Muslim empires expanded. And this fear, combined with economic desperation, pushed European rulers, merchants, and explorers to search for new routes to Asia, hoping to find wealth, allies, and perhaps even new lands where their influence could expand once again.
During this desperate search for opportunity, one book began inspiring the imagination of young Europeans more than any other: the travel accounts of Marco Polo, who had written about the incredible wealth of Asia, describing golden palaces, powerful emperors, and cities filled with unimaginable riches. And although many of his stories were exaggerated, they ignited a powerful dream in Europe, that somewhere beyond the horizon existed lands filled with gold, waiting to be reached. Among the many dreamers inspired by these stories was a determined sailor from Genoa named Christopher Columbus, a man not born into privilege, but driven by ambition. a man who spent his life at sea, learning navigation and studying geography, convinced that if the earth was round, then sailing west across the Atlantic Ocean could provide a shorter route to the riches of Asia than the dangerous eastern trade routes controlled by rival powers.
But Columbus was not only searching for gold. He believed he had a divine purpose, seeing himself as a man chosen to expand Christianity into unknown lands, dreaming not only of wealth, but also of spreading faith and building a new Christian influence across distant territories, a belief that gave him the determination to continue even when powerful kings rejected his proposals again and again.
For years, he traveled from court to court across Europe, presenting his bold idea, from Portugal to England and finally to Spain, facing rejection, mockery, and doubt, yet refusing to abandon his belief that beyond the Western Ocean lay the opportunity that could change not only his own destiny, but the fate of Europe itself.
Finally, his persistence brought him to the Spanish court of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, rulers who had just completed their long struggle to unite Spain. And perhaps because they too dreamed of wealth and religious expansion, they decided to take a chance on this ambitious sailor, granting him ships, titles, and promises of reward if his dangerous journey succeeded.
With limited supplies, 3 small ships, and a crew of uncertain loyalty, Columbus prepared for the voyage that would unknowingly connect 2 worlds separated for over 11,000 years, setting sail, not knowing whether he would find glory, disaster, or simply disappear into the endless Atlantic Ocean.
On the morning of August 3rd, 1492, under the sound of church bells and the prayers of hopeful supporters, Christopher Columbus began his historic voyage across the Atlantic Ocean with 3 small ships, the Santa Maria, the Nina, and the Pinta, carrying only 89 men, limited food, basic weapons, and fragile hope. As these wooden vessels slowly moved away from the shores of Spain into waters that many Europeans believed could lead to either unimaginable wealth or certain death. At first, the journey seemed calm and promising. Favorable winds carried the ships westward, and the crew remained optimistic, trusting their captain and dreaming of rewards promised by the Spanish crown. But as days turned into weeks and nothing but endless blue water surrounded them, confidence slowly began to turn into fear, because no one knew how far this ocean truly stretched, or whether land even existed ahead. Columbus tried to maintain discipline by appearing confident, studying the positions of the sun, moon, and stars, using simple navigation instruments, while pretending to possess greater expertise than he truly had, because he understood that his authority depended not only on skill, but on the crew's belief that he knew where he was going. But after many days without seeing birds, land, or even floating branches, the sailors began whispering among themselves, fearing that Columbus had miscalculated and that they were sailing toward starvation, their supplies slowly decreasing, while the horizon remained empty in every direction, creating a growing tension that threatened to break the fragile unity of the expedition.
Soon, frustration turned into anger, as some crew members began openly demanding that the ships turn back, believing that continuing forward meant certain death. And when Columbus refused, their fear transformed into dangerous thoughts, including the idea that killing their captain might be the only way to save their own lives.
As fear spread, the crew began experiencing strange illusions, sometimes believing they saw land in the distance, only to find nothing there. Their desperate minds creating mirages, just as thirsty travelers see water in deserts, until hope itself began to feel like a dangerous illusion.
Then, one evening in October, everything changed. When the crew began noticing flocks of birds flying overhead, a sign that land might be near. And suddenly, those birds became symbols of salvation, their wings carrying hope across the sky, as Columbus ordered the ships to follow their direction, despite lingering doubts among the exhausted sailors.
Yet even after following the birds for days, no land appeared. And once again, desperation returned, as the crew threatened Columbus with death unless he promised to turn back soon, forcing him to make a final, desperate agreement that if land was not found within 3 days, they would return to Spain.
Driven by fear of failure and death, Columbus ordered the ships forward at full speed during those final days, ignoring the dangers of unseen reefs or storms, pacing restlessly across the deck while staring at the horizon, knowing his fate would be decided very soon.
Then, on the night of October 11, 1492, Columbus claimed to see a distant flickering light on the horizon, a mysterious glow that others could barely see. But only hours later, a sailor aboard the Pinta finally shouted the word every man had been praying for: tierra, land. And in that moment, after 36 days at sea, the lost world of the Americas returned to human history. In the next chapter of this journey, we will witness how fragile colonies turned into powerful movements, how rebellion turned into revolution, and how a distant land of explorers slowly transformed into the United States of America, a story of independence, war, and the birth of a nation. Thanks for watching Mind Expedition, and if you want to continue this incredible journey through history, make sure to subscribe and join the expedition.